Coming up next on Your World.
He's in the house and you're in the house.
It was a horrible experience. That man became my worst nightmare. I went through so many days after school just being molested. I can remember crying out loud for my mommy and daddy.
Would you say this is a generational thing? Did your mom have anything?
She shared with me that she was abused as a little girl. Her brother raped her at gunpoint.
What's going on in this world today? You nearly died.
I go to the door and I just crack it, and he pushed his way through. He pulled out a gun, and I'm screaming and I'm crying. The thought that's going on in my head is I'm about to die tonight.
He did shoot you, right?
Yes, he shot me twice. As I'm bleeding, I'm screaming, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
That's a good name to scream when you can't remember scripture. Welcome. You know, we have only 30 minutes together today. By the time this program is over, 600 people, perhaps someone you know, will experience abuse at the hands of someone close to them. 1 in 3 women will be victims of domestic violence. It's mind-boggling to consider that on average, 20 people per minute are victims of domestic violence in the United States alone. Today, you'll meet 2 women who've been impacted by domestic abuse, both who barely escaped with their lives. These women are here to share their stories of how they got out of the abuse, and now they are working their way back to a healthy and whole life. Now, if you or someone you love is dealing with abuse, today's program is going to give you some answers and directions. Today's show is going to help us to recognize the signs of domestic abuse, how to deal with it, and how to walk in our God-given authority. I'm Creflo, and this is Your World.
Changing one life, time after time. Oh Lord, we do it all for you.
Through the trials I see, I'll always believe a new life starts with me. Oh,
Change your world today. Change is gonna come your way. Change and gain an understanding. His grace will transform you.
You know, our first guest became a victim of abuse and sexual molestation before she became a teenager. Her childhood spiraled into a pattern of abusive relationships and led to a failed marriage and a tremendous amount of self-loathing. Help me welcome Alyssa. We're finding that a lot of people are being ministered to when we take the time to allow our guests to bring them into their world. Your mother rented out a room to a guy that was known as Uncle Rogers. He's in the house and you're in the house. Start there
Yes.
and tell us about it.
It was a horrible experience. That man became my worst nightmare. That man came in bearing gifts, you know, treated me really well.
You know, the predator always shows up with gifts.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are here, if you have children and somebody's showing up with expensive gifts, it's a part of hunting. It's a part that the predator plays. Go ahead.
I thought of him as an uncle, and he took advantage of that. And so I went through so many days and nights after school just being molested. And I can remember crying out loud for my mommy and daddy. Wasn't anybody coming. And so I went through life very angry at my mother because I felt like she didn't protect me. My grandmother passed at an early age, and I just felt like if I could just go be with her, you know, she would protect me. Because right now my mother's not protecting me, my father's outside of the home. And so I just wanted to go to that place. You know, I tried to commit suicide. And when I wasn't successful with that, I opened up to a childhood friend. And you know how you make them promise not to tell. She went and told a counselor. Once my mother came in and learned about what had happened, it was kind of like she pushed me into silence because of her looks and how she reacted. I can't stress enough how important it is for when your child comes to you to make them feel welcomed.
And I'm sure once the counselor got it, they contacted the policeman and Uncle Roger.
He was made to move out of our home, yes.
Yeah. Would you say this is a generational thing? Did your mom have anything?
I went through life very angry at my mother. I wrote 3 letters, one to myself as a little girl because I blamed myself for my abuse. I wrote my abuser and I wrote my mother because I felt like she didn't protect me. She cried hysterically and she shared with me that she was abused as a little girl. Her mother passed at 12 years old. She got sent to go live with her brother. Her brother raped her at gunpoint. And then from there, she went and moved to Ohio, lived with her sister, and then her husband molested her. So all my mother knew was to sweep it under the rug. So when it happened to me, she didn't know how to act.
How did you choose to begin the process of dealing with what had happened to you?
I was married at an early age. That marriage was a complete failure. And it wasn't until we was going through our divorce where I had to really understand, I had to find out who Alyssa was. I had to really get back to self and loving me. God sent me an amazing husband that I have now that was able to show me so many things about myself, but really teach me how to really move into a place of healing. And so starting the movement with Survivors with Voices and the organization that I have, it just really pushed me to understand that us as survivors, we're not alone. And a lot of times when we go through our things, we often feel like we're by ourselves.
So you now know, because of this organization that you've started, how important it is to give voice to your pain?
Yes.
What have you seen as a result of starting this organization?
I'm gonna be honest, I've seen more than what I've asked for, to be honest. But I've had so many survivors come through the organization that's been in a domestic violence. We've had a young lady come through the organization, 13 years old, that was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend. So we've seen a lot of situations, some that's blown our minds, but it's the support that we've created within the organization where it's survivor to survivor.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When you think you're the only one,
Right.
and nobody's ever giving voice to it, you're neglecting even the healing that comes by knowing that you're not the only one that has gone through this, and there are other people who can give you the support to help you to get out of this.
Yes.
What normally turns out in the lives of individuals who don't give a voice to this?
Suicidal thoughts,
Yeah.
depression, and living in their sorrow. Even in my younger days, I was called promiscuous, and a lot of times you might meet that promiscuous young teenager, but you just don't understand that they may have been abused, they may have been molested at that period of time. And so with that, you have to ask yourself, are they crying out for help? Are they crying out for attention? Because for me, I became promiscuous. That was my vice. I felt like that's all that men wanted from me. Fell into the arms of an older man. That turned out to be an abusive relationship, and because I did not love myself and I did not value myself, I took that abuse. And so a lot of times you have to understand and learn and know that just because of where you came from doesn't mean that you have to accept a man hitting on you or abusing you or telling you that you're not worth anything.
Amen.
You have to get back to you.
Amen. That's awesome. My heart is just like, what's going on in this world today? Verbal abuse, there's sexual abuse, physical abuse. When you think children are not impacted by all of that abuse, they are tremendously impacted by that abuse.
You have some that turns around and become the abuser.
So you're saying that there is a likelihood
Yes.
that the person who has been abused will, if he doesn't get the proper help he needs,
Correct.
if he doesn't give voice to his abuse, if he keeps it quiet and secret, then there's a chance that he's going to repeat the same thing with somebody else. And so on, and so on, until we see what we see today.
Correct.
You know, I'm sure you've encountered a lot of people with a
Yes.
whole lot of interesting stories. Now, the good news for us is that our past doesn't have to define our future.
That is true.
And even better, God can bring healing and deliverance into those past hurts and cause good where the enemy means only evil. Now, when we come back, you will meet our next guest who wears a physical reminder, bullet wounds, of her near-death escape from her abuser, and will share her plan on how to make sure this never happens again. Don't go away.
You've seen the show. Now come and be a part of it. Join Dr. Dollar and guests as they explore the issues of life, love, and personal growth.
The show was designed to provide hope so that people could understand the grace of God and His unmerited, undeserved favor to make the difference in your life.
For free tickets to be a part of our studio audience, email yourworld@worldchangers.org or online at yourworldwithcreflo.com.
Now, my next guest is a victim of domestic abuse who only survived her abusive relationship by the miraculous grace of God. That's the only way you can explain that. She's here to share her story today. Please help me welcome Deanna Clark to Your World. Wow, your story it blew my mind. So take us into your world. Talk to us about how this domestic abuse started and how you nearly died as a result of it.
2004, I was asked by my sister to attend my nephew's Little League football game, and I told her I would. And so when I got there, I noticed this guy. He was fine. He was really, really cute. He was. And
so that lets you know. Just because he's fine and really, really cute, you want to have 1,000-question date so you can find out more than he being fine and really, really cute. Go ahead.
And so I remember one particular weekend, he asked to see my phone. And so I let him see my phone, and he went through all of my contacts, and he said, when you come back next weekend, you better have all male contacts out of your phone.
Really?
Yes. As I was driving home, I was just like, I can't do this. I need to end the relationship.
And this was at the beginning of the relationship?
Yes, this was in the beginning. And he told me, well, I'm sorry, I apologize. You won't have to worry about me ever doing that again. And if you come back next weekend, I'll take you shopping and get you whatever you want. I chose to put on my blinders. And
You chose to put on your blinders?
I chose to. I chose
Wow.
to put them on. I had just graduated from college. And so I made the decision to move to Columbus, and my mother pleaded with me not to move because she felt that he was not a good person for me. He had quit his job because he felt that, and he told me he felt that he and I wasn't spending enough time together. That left me to pay for all the bills and struggle. I went to him and I said, hey, can you get a job? And he did, but it was a second shift job. So he had a reliable car, but he wanted me to take him to work and pick him up so that he knew where I was all the time.
Whole controlling issue right there,
Yes,
right?
yes. And our arguments began to be shouting matches. Him being very aggressive and just telling me, nobody wanted me, I was getting fat. He beat me down mentally. He tore my mind up, he broke it. And I remember one day my mother called me and she said, it's still not too late to come back home if you want to. And I told her, I said, no, I'm fine, I'm okay where I am. Thanksgiving, we went down to Dayton to be with my family. And he told them, he said, when I get through with Deanna, she's gonna be better than all of you guys. It was at that moment that I realized he no longer looked at me as a human being, but an object. My father called me. He said, are you sure that everything's going well in your relationship? And I lied, and I told him it was. My sisters, they asked the same thing, and I lied again. One day, I told him that I was going out with his sister. When I got home, I opened up the door, and there he was sitting in complete darkness in the home. Nothing, no TV on, no lights on, just sitting there in the dark. That was the first time that I feared him. He started to argue, where have you been? Who were you with? And I told him, I said, I did everything I told you that I was gonna do.
Why didn't you tell everybody the truth when they asked you?
I was ashamed and embarrassed because my mother did not raise us to allow a man to say certain things or talk to us a certain way.
Did he play a part, you think, in making you feel that shame?
Absolutely. I would tell him things about my family, and he would use that to get me away from them. Like, what your mother said about you, that wasn't right. That wasn't right. You may want to just distance yourself from her because she's not talking right. Because I allowed him to break me down mentally, I turned my back on my mom.
So you came in that night, you saw him sitting in the dark, maybe on purpose trying to put that fear on you, and you decided, I got to get out of this?
I did, and that next day I told him that I felt like God was telling me that I should leave the relationship. And he stated that, you know what, God has been telling me the same thing, that I need to let you go. And within 2 weeks, I got a place. That next week, I was on the phone with my mother. He called, he asked me what was I doing. I told him I was on the phone. And in a matter of minutes, he was knocking at my door. And my mother said, don't open the door. Don't open the door, he's gonna try to kill you. And I was like, no, he's not gonna do anything to me. I go to the door and I just crack it. And he pushed his way through and he searched my home upstairs and downstairs to see if anyone was there, and he left. That second week, I get to my residence and I see him parked. I notice that he's drunk, and I just tell him, lay yourself in when you're ready. And so he comes and he says, you know what, Deanna, I don't appreciate the things that you said to me over the phone. You told me that you didn't love me. You told me that you did not want to be with me. I can go out here and blow my head off and you wouldn't care. I said I would care. You know, I love you, but I love you from a distance. And that's when he reached in front of his pants and he pulled out a gun. And when he pulled out the gun, I ran for my door and I almost got out, but he snatched me by the back of my shirt and he pulled me back in and he pinned himself up against the door so that I couldn't get out. And so I was screaming and I was crying and I'm screaming and I'm crying. The thought that's going on in my head is I'm about to die tonight. And I'm screaming and he's just like, shut up, Deanna, shut up. And I went to go reach for the doorknob, and that's when he raised the gun up towards me and he squeezed the trigger twice, once in the chest and once in the wrist. And I looked at him and it was as if I didn't know who he was. It was like as if he was a different person. And so I opened the door and the first thought that came to my mind was I did not want my mother to see me in a casket. And as I was running, I
want to make it clear, he did shoot you, right?
Yes, he shot me twice. As I was running, I heard the blood coming out of me as if you were pouring water out of a gallon jug and you can hear the sound that it makes. I was going to everyone's door knocking and screaming, help, help me, help me. I go into this man's house and I ask him to get me towels and I'm laying out on his floor and I'm bleeding. But as I'm bleeding, I'm screaming, Jesus, 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 Jesus. And it was like the more that I screamed Jesus, the more it was like life was being put back into me, which was strange because to me, I'm up here dying.
That's a good name to scream when you can't remember scripture.
Yes. So the ambulance came, the police came, and they asked me if I shot him. And just making a long story short, he shot himself in the head, and he's still living to this day. The bullet is still lodged in his head. If they remove it, they feel like it will cause further damage and he might die. So he's confined to a wheelchair. I was in the hospital for 7 days. I asked my mother to take me to the hospital to see him. When I got there, I prayed for him, and I told him that I forgave him and that he needed to live.
Wow. Wow. So you the guy that shot you, shot himself. You went to the hospital to pray for him and to forgive him, and you told him that you forgave him.
Yes.
That's powerful. That's powerful right there. So as a result of all of this that you've gone through, what do we get out of this? What's the message here?
The message is, don't mess with crazy men.
No matter how they look, huh?
Recognize the signs. Recognize the signs.
Now, there are some things that you also learned as far as warning signs and things that if you're in this kind of relationship, you want to make sure that you understand that control is the issue. And their fear is to be afraid of losing control.
A lot of times people will say, you know, girl, get out of the relationship. You know, just leave him. But they don't realize that when a person leaves a domestic violence relationship, they are 70 times higher or more likely to be killed. When you're in this mode and you know that you're going to leave, you have to have a plan, but you also have to act the same way that they've been acting towards the batterer, because one change and that batterer knows it, then they know that they've lost control.
When she came to give her voice to your organization. What were some of the things you guys advised her to do?
When I heard her story, I was just like, oh my goodness. But the good thing about Deanna is she was already using her voice when she came to us. So she was able to be a voice for the other survivors that we had that was still in that situation. So she came to us, you know, already being a voice. And so we just enhanced on that and built upon it and put her in a place in our support group to impact the other survivors that was already there in the situation.
Well, I thank God that you're there.
Thank you.
I thank God that... I don't think people really understand sometimes what it feels like to be devalued and the journey you have to take to try to get that back, try to get your significance and value back.
It takes you to suicide. You know, I wanted to commit suicide because I didn't feel, you know, that self-worth. I wanted to end my life. I wanted to just give up on life totally and completely. However, and I can flashback to the night where I was at the bridge, like all I got to do is jump. God had me think about all the people's lives that I touch through what I do and say, if you don't do it for yourself, you have to do it for them.
Wow.
You have to be that living example.
Wow.
Yep. Yep.
Thank both of you for being alive. You're representing millions of women.
Yeah.
And that's sad for me to say. For me to have to say millions.
Yeah.
Who have been devalued by little boys in search of their manhood. And there's not a man there to show them how to be the man that God called them to be. Your voices are still needed.
Yes.
Because you have given a voice
Yes.
as a survivor.
Yes.
Don't you appreciate these two ladies so very much? Oh, yeah. I taught this thing a couple years ago on 1,000 questions. And until you're satisfied with that fellowship time that you have, you can be led how to do this. I mean, I don't expect for you to go on the first date and say, you know, what's your name? What's your middle name? Do you have a job? Do you have insurance? Where do you work at? How much do you make?
That might not be so bad.
It may not be so bad in one perspective. In another perspective, you're never going to get anybody because you're going to run them away. Because they're going to be like, what the world is this? You know, they don't understand what you're saying. But to explain that we're going to have a conversation, and I'd like to have a conversation to get to know you. There's nobody coming over. We're not doing this. We're going to meet, and I just want to make sure we take our time and talk and get to know what's going on, and then decide how we're going to interact as a result of our conversation. A lot of talking on the telephone, talking maybe in a public place. But I don't really want you to know where I live at, because if you do have that crazy guy and you hadn't gotten to that question yet, you know, what does your father do? What was the relationship? Because most likely, whatever you've gone through, there's a potential of you becoming.
Yes.
We talked about that. And I'm sure there was a whole lot more stuff that he had gone through, because he sounds like a person who was devalued himself, and he was trying to find value in his own life. He sounded like a person who didn't understand what real manhood was about. Anytime you have a guy who's trying to control you to the point where they can get you to serve them, they don't know what real manhood is about. Because real manhood is about sacrificial serving.
Yeah.
And when you find some man that's not willing to produce sacrificial serving, then he doesn't know what manhood is about. You probably got some punk who's going to end up abusing you or trying to control you because he doesn't know what real manhood. Now, your husband, the Boaz right here on the front row.
Yes, he on the front row.
Yeah, that's a real man.
Yes.
Because he was willing to serve you and love you regardless of your past.
Correct.
And his sacrificial servanthood that just constantly says, I'm going to spend time with you. And
He
I think,
wouldn't let me leave either. I'm a runner. He was like, no, you staying right here
Yeah.
in this relationship.
yeah, my man. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's real manhood. You know, domestic abuse affects everyone. It doesn't matter what your culture or where you're from. Everyone has access to God's ever-loving and healing power. His grace is truly sufficient for you. And whatever you are going through today, God wants to help you move beyond it. And all you have to do is to lean on Him and trust in His healing power. My announcer is going to share with you some very special resources that I've put together for you. And I'll be right back Watch this.
600. That's the number of people who were victims of domestic violence while you were tuned in to this show. That's 20 people physically abused and beaten every minute for the past 30 minutes. Together, with God's grace, we have the power to be a beacon of hope for those suffering through domestic abuse, to rescue women from danger and to save lives. Join Dr. Creflo Dollar's quest to find answers and practical solutions to problems through global initiatives like Prestige. Together, we are on a mission to eradicate fear and anxiety and replace it with hope, love, joy, and laughter. And it's all done through the power of God's grace and people like you who are seeking change. Alyssa Jones and Deonna Clark lived in danger, but by trusting God, they found the courage to leave their abuser. Now, both are sharing their stories in hopes of helping others. Today, you can join this revolution of change and receive tools and resources that will help you become a world changer. With your donation of only $30 or more, you will receive Dr. Dollar's 3-CD series, Your Identity in Christ. This series will teach you the importance of knowing how to transform your life and ignite the spark in others to help rebuild our homes, communities, and world. You'll also receive Pastor Taffy Dollar's popular book, Embracing the Love, which teaches you to strengthen the most important relationship of your life, the one with yourself. Embracing the Love offers spiritual guidance and practical advice on healthy relationships that enhance rather than deplete. And for continued inspiration on your journey of change, as a special gift, you'll also receive the full, uncut copy of today's show. Become part of our mission to change the world by calling or going online today. For only $30, you can make a difference. Donate today and join the movement of believers who are changing the world by taking God's message to those in need. Ministry partners are standing by for your call.
Stay connected with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and know that I'd love to hear your story. Remember that God's love and grace are sufficient and that you were born to win. I'll see you next time right here on Your World.
Thank you, partners and friends. Your love and financial support makes it possible to bring this message into millions of homes all across the globe.